Welcome to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 63. I am your host, Anna Osborne, coming to you live from the Her Life Unscripted studios. And it is a fantastic day to connect with all of you guys, and I'm happy to be here. I batched a few podcasts last month, and so it feels like it's been a little time since I've recorded, even though I have been coming to you each week. Sometimes I will get a couple episodes ahead, just when I am foreseeing stress in the calendar and wanting to make the best of my time. So it's nice to be able to sit down and record with all of you today. And it is a new month, which means we have a new theme amongst us. As you know how we do here at Her Life Unscripted, we spend each month being able to focus on a different theme, a different topic, and really try our best to explore it from all angles. Last month was so much fun. It was the 1-year birthday anniversary, who knows what you actually call it, of Her Life Unscripted. 1 year it has been around, and it is amazing what a year does. I think that I have learned so much. Obviously, that was the whole theme of last month's podcast, was being able to really share what I've learned about myself, about you guys, about the world. And it's just been absolutely amazing to do. And I'm excited to keep going. I think for me, one of the biggest fears, maybe, well, not biggest fears. There was lots of fears in terms of starting the podcast, but one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea of just being very conscientious of the relationship that we're building. I am an avid podcast listener, and I feel like I know the people that I listen to, which can be funny, right? Because I've never met them. They don't know who I am. I'm just a download number, but I feel like I have this personal connection to them. And what's been really cool is I've reached out to a number of them, and what I have found over and over again is I'm so much more than a download number. I'm somebody who enjoys their work and follows them and encourages them. And that really is what you guys have been for me, is so much more than just a little listening number that I see come across my stats, which I actually don't look at too much because part of me doesn't understand them all. There's so many nuances, but the other part of me is tried in the last few years, especially to not be, hold myself to a standard based on a number, whether that's the number on the scale or the number in my bank account or whatever the case may be. And so I've really tried hard to have that same mentality when it comes to download numbers. So I'll read other people's numbers and how big their fan base is, and I'll think, oh, I want to see what mine are. And they'll look at mine and I'll go, oh my gosh, they're amazing. I suck. And then I realized, hang on a second. What am I doing with this crazy comparison? So anyways, the point of that is that I know people are listening, and I'm just so excited because I know for me, one of the things I wanted to be very conscientious of was that there are a lot of podcasts that fade, is that, just life happens and motivation happens and interest change and all kinds of different things. And so it was a big, big success for me to make that 1 year mark and feel like I've been able to do this consistently. And honestly, I love it. It is such a fun, creative outlet, being able to slow down with all of you and really connect. So I am glad that we have passed our 1 year mark, and my plan is to continue going full steam ahead so that we will have lots of opportunities to continue to get to know each other, and for you guys to just continue the conversation after the episode is over. And I encourage you guys, if there's a particular episode that really stood out to you, share it with a friend. Let them kind of be part of our community and join what we're doing. So anyways, that's really exciting to know that we've made it past that 1 year and that we haven't faded. We're going strong, ladies. And yeah, so that's kind of what's going on in terms of the podcast world. Personally, it is July and I've got a great family trip coming up in a couple weeks to Lake Tahoe. We go every year with a couple other families. We rent a cabin and each year we rent a place closer and closer to the lake. And this year we're actually viewing the lake. We have a lake view condo that we rented and we're so excited to be that close to the lake and the kids are just excited. For those of you that are not in the Northern California area, we had the wettest winter that we've had in, I don't know, a decade. I mean, it's been so wet to the point that honestly, last week, okay, late June, last week, we still had snow happening in the Sierra Mountains. And so I live about 2 hours from Tahoe. And literally I had friends posting pictures of the snow and it was crazy to me. Right. And so we're getting ready to head up there in a couple weeks. And all I'm thinking is it's going to be one cold lake if there's still snow going on. Right. So we'll see how much swimming happens. We all know that kids are like polar bears. They'll swim no matter what the temperature is, but I'm really just looking forward to that time together with the family and friends. And honestly, I feel like I've kind of let myself down in some ways, which I know sounds really critical, but I have been planning on taking time off and I just haven't been as good about it as I say I'm going to be. And I know that I told all of you guys a few months ago that I was planning on taking more time off this year and I just haven't followed through on that. And I am actually just thought of it right now, but it kind of weaves into what we're talking about this month. And so I'm trying to get to the bottom of that, of why I am not taking time off when I need to. And I'm trying to figure it out. So if any of you guys have the answer for me, please reach out. Let me know. I'm actually very open to your guys' feedback because if there's any of you listening that have gotten really good at taking time off, let me know. I am able to take long weekends and things like that, but being away from the practice and for my clients and just from it all for a week is really, really a lot. And I know I actually had one client tell me the other day, when are you going to take a vacation? Because you need to. And she said it so lovingly that it didn't hurt my feelings, but she was right. Like I need to take some time off. So I'm really looking forward to that in a couple weeks to take some time off with the family. But if there are any of you who are listeners out there and you are so good about taking time off, will you please let me know how you do it? Because I keep telling you I'm going to do it and I'm not following through and I need to get to the bottom of that. So that is my ask of you guys. And that's kind of what's going on with me personally. So I think that's it that I can think of. Oh, other exciting news. We are almost sold out for the Shine Retreat and we've got a few spots left and it's so crazy. We're about 2.5 months out to the retreat and we're starting to fill up and that's really exciting. And I think what's so funny is that everybody says like, well, once it gets closer, you guys are going to sell that thing out like crazy. And now that it's closer, we're selling it out like crazy. And it's amazing to me because I am a planner. I'm sure you guys have got the sense of that. And so I love having things on the calendar in advance. And I realize that thankfully the rest of the world is not like that. And there are a number of you guys out there that are planners, but there are some of you that are really good at spontaneous planning. And I love that. I want to learn from you on how to do that. But it's also really cool to see as we're getting closer to the retreat that we're getting close to being at capacity. So we are really intentionally keeping this retreat small because we want it to be an intimate, connective feel to the weekend. And what I've so loved about what Mari and I have done in the behind the scenes planning is make this trip a beautiful blend this weekend, a beautiful blend of really intentional self-care, mindfulness practices, nourishing food, gorgeous oceanside location, and time for yourself. And so it is this blend of being able to really feed your soul, like have that soul satisfying experience where you walk away feeling more connected with yourself and more in line with your values and how you want to show up in the world. And also the ability to just kind of be free and explore and roam around. And Laguna Beach is a gorgeous place to do that. So if you have any questions or are interested about the retreat, please feel free to email Mari or myself to info@shineretreatforwomen.com, or you can always go to our website, www.shineretreatforwomen.com. I'm so excited that it's coming and I'm nervous. I am such an extrovert. and I love people. And I always get this little bit of anxiety before I meet new people. So I'm excited to meet all of you that are coming. And those of you that are right on the edge of signing up, we so encourage you to come. And yeah, I can't wait to meet you in person and let all those butterflies dissipate as I just dive into the experience with all of you. So that is it when it comes to housekeeping. But before we move on, I need to tell you what we're talking about this month. Well, what we are talking about is freedom this month. I love 4th of July. It is probably my second favorite holiday next to Thanksgiving. And, 4th of July obviously has a huge significance for us living in the States. It is the anniversary of our independence. And so I thought, for the month of July, what if we really focused on releasing ourselves and achieving freedom through different things that tie us down or weigh us down? And so that's what we're talking about this month. And specifically each week for the podcast, we'll really be talking about the things that weigh us down and honestly some strategies of how to be able to be free from them, right? I think is it Martina McBride that has the song Independence Day? Anyways, it's like old school country. I don't know, probably like early or mid-90s, late 90s country, her song, Let Freedom Ring, Let the White Dove Sail. And so when I was thinking about this month's theme, that song was in my head of just letting things fly and being free and no longer weighted down by these things that just grab a hold of us and keep us really entangled in the weeds. And so that is what we're talking about this month. And I'm excited to dive into today's topic, talking about the yucky, gunky crap of guilt and shame. And I know we've done a couple different podcasts of looking at these ideas of what shame is and what guilt is and, kind of how do we define them and things like that. And so I want to look kind of at a different angle from them, but I want to look at it of really kind of what creates shame? Like, how do we get stuck in that place to begin with? Because like I've shared about, Brene Brown's work is so much about shame not wanting to be spoken. It's really something that keeps us small and keeps us isolated. And that, shame is really the sense of there's something wrong with me, right? Guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. Like my being is wrong. And so it's kind of got this idea of, all right, shame sucks, right? Shame is crappy and guilt is crappy because it motivates us to make choices that aren't so great when we make choices out of guilt or shame. But what causes it? Like, how do we get there in the first place? And, I think that there's a lot of shoulds that are involved with guilt, right? I know that when, even a moment ago, speaking to you guys about really just struggling to take time off and trying to figure out why can I not take time off? And one of them is I love my job. Like I really love what I do and I love my family. And, right now I'm working part-time. And so I feel like, why do I need time off from a part-time job? Like that's ridiculous, right? So there's a part of me that there's a shaming I put on that idea of taking time off, right? I work part-time. Who am I to say I need time off from that? But that's a shaming message, right? That keeps me stuck. That keeps me doing something rather than stepping back and reevaluating and say, wait a second here. Why am I shaming this idea of taking time off? Whether it's a full-time job or a part-time job, I have the ability to do that. So why am I not embracing it? But I think the other piece that plays into it is a sense of guilt. Like, the shoulds that are connected with guilt of, I meet with clients each week and I so value that time and my hope is they value it too. And so why should I take time off? What if they really need something? And how have I kind of created the ability for me to take time off and everything to continue to flow smoothly? So there's some weird guilt connected with it. But if we look at the idea of guilt is feeling bad for doing something wrong, and setting a boundary or setting a limit or saying, no, I need time off isn't something we should feel guilty about. So that really leads me to this idea of, is it actually shaming messages I'm putting on taking time off? And I think that when we get really introspective about that, at least for myself, I can connect with this message of, am I saying that me taking time off means that I'm not a good therapist? Does it mean I don't really care? Like, what does it mean? And so I think that there's a lot of juice there, if you will, meat there, that I really actually need to slow down and look at to get a better answer of why am I not taking time off when I'm telling all of you lovely people that I have a plan to do that and then not following through on the plan. So I'm trying to figure it out. But back to this idea of where does shame come from? And so I did a little research, a little Google, a little kind of like, I want to know, where does it come from? And I found this article and, it's just kind of like a pop culture article written by somebody. And I can share the article too if you guys are interested in. But it kind of talks about these ideas, and there's multiple articles that I pulled from, this idea of what really contributes to shame. Like if we're having this experience of shame, what contributes to it, right? And one of the things that they listed is this idea of when we are aware that others are making judgment about us, or our choices, or our actions, our behaviors, that it's priming this experience of shame. Like it's priming the inevitability that there will be shame, right? So if there is a set of rules that we are finding ourselves having to follow, or somebody who is sitting judge and jury saying whether or not our actions are right or wrong, that we're more inclined to feel a sense of shame. Because if we do it differently than we think others believe that we should, that we have this experience where there's much more likely for shame to happen. And I love that definition because it really tied into this idea of asking for time off from a part-time job. Now, as most of you know, I'm my own boss, so sometimes she's nice letting me have time off, but lately she hasn't been so great. But this idea of what happens if somebody is listening to this and their automatic thought is, really, Anna, time off from a part-time job? Like, get over yourself. Right? So somewhere I have internalized a social norm or a set of rules that people, meaning me, that work part-time don't really need time off because they already have the rest of their time off, which is crap, right? Because the rest of the time off, I'm working at home. Like they're parenting and keeping my small children breathing and alive and fed and right. And so it's crazy that this social norm, wherever I created it from, has now led to this idea that asking for or planning for time off from a part-time job is unnecessary and frivolous, right? So it's like, yeah, there's this shaming message there, but it really starts to really kind of boil down this idea when people say like, well, where does shame come from? One of the huge places is when we are up against judgment or a set of rules that right or wrong exists, right? And I'm saying this in air quotes. I know you guys can't see it, because the idea of right or wrong to me sometimes is quite ambiguous. But somewhere we have gathered information that there's a right way of doing it, and then there's the way that we did it, and we did it wrong. We screwed it up. And that, my friends, really does start this like landslide down into the muck of shame. So I feel like that's just an important thing for us to realize that, you know, we cannot be free of shame if we are constantly in environments, whether they are perceived or real, where judgment is occurring. Let me say that again. We cannot be free of shame if we are constantly in environments where we are in perceived or real elements of judgment. It doesn't work. And so the antidote to that, right? The ability to move out of having shame triggered over and over again or lumping shame upon shame is really being able to look at our environments. Are the ways that we move about the world with people that we move about the world with, is it full of judgment? And sadly, I think a lot of you are probably nodding your heads right now saying, yes, it is full of judgment. I cannot be in a place where I don't feel judged. And my heart breaks to even put words to that. But I know that that is the reality for a lot of us more often than we would like to admit. And so part of that is being able to say, why do I need to be in environments with people that are placing judgment on me, right? Oftentimes the answer is I don't have to. Why am I still doing it, right? Why am I continuing to slam my head against the wall, because it feels so good when I stop. But the other part of it is, do I need to be so hard on myself, right? If this is a self-inflicted judgment, why do I have to be so hard on myself? And oftentimes the answer is I don't. Or the crazy thing is, right, sometimes it is I do because that's what everybody else has done. That's what mom did to me. That's what partner did to me. That's what, all these wounds from the past that are actually making it to where we feel like, well, I've got to be hard on myself because it's the only way that I grow. Which I think kind of leads to this other idea of where does shame come from? And one of the things that I think, it's kind of not included in some of the research I did, but I really believe it to be true, is this idea of perfectionism. I feel like perfectionism is a cesspool or a petri dish to grow shame. Because when we are demanding perfection from ourselves, we have set ourselves up to an impossible standard that nobody, Nobody's perfect. And I know you know that for other people, but sometimes you don't know it for you. I know you don't expect me to be perfect, and yet sometimes I demand perfection from myself. And so this idea that perfectionism leads to shame, to me, feels spot on. And quite honestly, when I am talking with folks and they talk about this, these high expectations or these rigorous standards they have on themselves, or just these really, really enormous expectations, and they talk about it from this anxious place, like, I'm feeling so anxious, there's so much to do and I'm the only one that can do it. And I kind of introduce this idea of, it sounds like there's some perfectionistic thinking going on. Most of the time, people will look at me and want to punch me because somewhere along the line, they heard the word perfection or perfectionism, and it has been used to criticize them and cut them down. And never, ever in my experience has my intention been to wound with that question. But what I've noticed is, especially now that I've seen the reaction it gets, is to come at it a little bit softer, but to really couple the need to be all things to all people is rooted in perfectionism, and it's riddled in shame. And I know for me, one of the things that I'm trying to do in my personal life and my professional life, and quite honestly in, this retreat with Mari in September, is how do we have honest conversations about the standards to which we have set for ourselves, but for no one else? Because then it becomes this crazy, crazy conflict, right? Where we have absolutely unrealistic expectations for ourselves, and yet we accept crumbs from other people, or we have totally unrealistic expectations of other people. All we do is beat ourselves up that we think we're constantly failing. Like, none of those dynamics come out with it feeling great. So this idea that perfectionism leads to shame, and it leads to that internal judgment, and it leads to these standards that are so far outside of what is realistic for any one of us combined, let alone just one of us, that those really create this experience of shame. And so, yeah, that's how it works, right? Like, okay, yes, I'm nodding my head along. I'm saying, yes, that is what creates shame. I have had those experiences. You have had those experiences. We're all on the same page with that. And so what do we do with it? Like, if we are in the month of July, if we are all about freedom this month, how do we release ourselves from shame? Because really, it keeps us shackled, right? It keeps us so small, and it keeps us apologetic. And I have to say, this is one thing that you guys aren't going to believe me, but there are lots of things that I don't express my opinion on just because I don't. But one of the things, which for those of you that know me are probably laughing because they're like, yeah, I think you're kind of opinionated. But there are things that I just choose not to give my opinions on for whatever reason. But one thing that I absolutely cannot bite my tongue around is when people say they're sorry. Now, hang on. I'm not saying like, I screwed up, I hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. I'm talking about where everything they say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, can you pass me the salt? Oh, I'm sorry, but I need a pen. Oh, you're sorry for what? What are you sorry about? And I'm sorry if this is a habit that you are in. I'm not trying to raise my voice with you, but it drives me absolutely batty when somebody is constantly apologizing for being themselves. You are allowed to salt your food. You are allowed to borrow a pen. You're apologizing for what, right? For breathing? For being human? I don't understand. And whenever I see people doing that, and now granted, these are people in my life, my friends, my family, when I see them constantly apologizing, I will say, and I'm totally rethinking this now as I'm saying it out loud, because I probably need to find a different way to say it, but I will literally say, what are you apologizing for? And I say it really nice and kind, but I don't understand. Why are you apologizing that you're asking for the gosh darn salt? And so I feel like this is the role that shame plays in our life. It keeps us small. It keeps us apologizing, and it drives me batty. And I do it too. I'm speaking to myself when I say that. My husband will ask me, do you want some water? Yeah, sorry, do you mind? What? That's craziness. Why am I apologizing for saying, yes, I would like some water because you offered to get me some at the dinner table? Oh, okay. Sorry. Rant over. I did not mean to go on a rant like that, but that's the role that shame plays in us, in our life. It keeps us small, it keeps us apologetic, and it's absolute garbage. So what would it be like to release it? What would it be like to finally be free of shame? Guilt and shame, quite honestly, because I think oftentimes we place guilt on situations that are unnecessary. But what would it be like to finally let it go? Sit with that for a second. Pause this episode. Get out a piece of paper and a pen, and write down every single flippin' thing that comes to mind. What would it be like to release yourself from the shackles of shame? What would it feel like? What would it taste like? What would it smell like? What would your life be like? And honestly, as I'm asking these questions, I feel myself like floating up in my chair. I physically feel myself sitting taller, sitting straighter, being more aware of this, almost this string that's pulling my chest up, the sense of pride. Like it would feel really good to no longer have shame in the sidecar. And so I want to encourage you guys, not necessarily in this moment to say, this is how I'm going to get rid of it, because we'll get there in a moment. But in this moment, ask yourself the question, what would it be like to release yourself of the shackles of shame? Get clear of it. And the reason I want you to do that, or wanted you to do that if you paused it then, is because it's going to fire you up. It's going to allow the adrenaline just to course through you. It's going to be a hell yeah. Yep. I want to be done with it, because the idea of being released from it feels so sensational. Tell me how. Give me the answer. I want to be so motivated to do it, right? And so the first thing that we do is we've got to acknowledge it. You've got to acknowledge this feeling of shame, that it exists, right? That I am feeling a feeling that I hate, and it sucks me down, and it keeps me small, and it keeps me apologetic, and it prevents me from fully being me. It's the first step. I've got to acknowledge it. And then it's going to get uncomfortable, because when we put words to something that we have stuffed down for so long, we all of a sudden feel panic. Oh, crud. What's happening? So I want you to breathe, because those of you right now that are thinking of this idea of acknowledging the role shame has happened and the role shame has played in our lives, I guarantee you're getting a sense of panic. So I need you to breathe. And the next thing is we start to look at it like we look at any other feeling. It will fade if we bring it into the light. Things that thrive in darkness do not survive in light. And shame is one of those things. And so when we pull shame out of the darkness and we say, you know what, buddy, you've been around for a while, but you're not working for me anymore. I need to release myself of you. When we pull it into the light, it starts to shrink because we've put words to it. We've created a sense of acknowledgement around it. We've created breath around it. And we've been able to look at this emotion just like we've looked at every other emotion, right? And we start to kind of shift the rules that we're living in within our lives, right? We talked at the beginning of this idea that shame is created when there is an experience of judgment, when we've violated some sort of social norms or some set of rules. And so what happens with shame, and the key to healing from it, is to start looking at whether or not the rules really work for us. And what I have found time and time again, when I've done this, is the rules don't really work for me. At least not the ones that I feel have been imposed upon me. And so sometimes we have to really step back and ask ourselves, are these rules able to be altered? And 99.9% of the time they are. We have the power to do that. And I want to encourage you guys to look at the rules you're living your life by, the shoulds and the expectations and the perfectionism. And I encourage you to challenge them. Get right up in their face and challenge them. Because I have a feeling that you will see some beautiful, beautiful things when you start to challenge them, and you'll be able to identify some new rules, some new truths that feel much more authentic to you and allow you to stand taller, more prideful, and more full of the experience of who you are, and away from the smallness and the muckiness of shame. So that is the release that I hope for all of you. And also the recognition that it is a gradual release, right? It's not something that just happens overnight. But the more that we get versed with it and the more that we practice it, the more we are able to really release ourselves from the shackles of shame and I'm excited to know you guys. I'm excited to know about your journey, and I encourage you to reach out. And honestly, I encourage you guys to head over to our Facebook group. I will put a link in the show notes, and I'd love for you guys to head over there and just give it a like so that we can continue the conversation. If there are thoughts, feelings, reactions that you're having to this episode, I always try and put a post up whenever there's a new episode. Comment on it. Tell me what stood out for you. I want to continue the conversation with you guys because you're dynamic, amazing people, and I cannot wait to be able to learn from you because you guys are amazing and you have so much to give and so much to learn. So I think that's it for today. Oh, I feel good. I feel freer, and I hope that you guys feel freer too. It's been an absolute joy to connect with all of you. And thank you for letting me into your worlds, into your hearts. It is always an honor and a privilege. And I am so excited to connect with all of you next week. Take care, my friends.
Want to learn about the latest retreats, workshops, and speaking events hosted by Anna? Head over to herlifeunscripted.com to get in on all the juicy details. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so we can continue to grow our amazing audience. Lastly, be sure and send in your voice feedback via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. We can't wait to hear from you.